Welcome to my world history notes, where I read from the book that I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. You can find it on lulu.com, amazon.com, or at the Bible Baptist bookstore. Just follow me here. I draw conclusions from world history, my study of world history, and you may not agree with my conclusions, but you should at least know about the people, places, ideas, concepts, times that I discuss. So, we're gonna get back to finish Constantine, Emperor Constantine, very important emperor in Rome for future history for Christianity. Um, Constantine is later quoted as saying that it is the goddess Fortuna, fortune or luck, that makes a man emperor in the ancient work Historia Augusta. He would not be the first or the last leader of a great nation to exploit the religious sentiments of his people to gain approval for his actions. According to Durant, he also surrounded himself with pagan philosophers and scholars. His letters to Christians show that he cared little for their theological differences and the war against heresy so prevalent in the early Christian church. His main and overarching concern as a Roman was that all Christians have unity, even if it had to be enforced by Roman law. Obviously, having seen the failure of a great persecution in his lifetime to stamp out Christianity, he chose a different tack to keep the Christians under control. Slowly, he began approving of Christianity officially and eventually gave money to Christian congregations and began building magnificent churches in keeping with the Roman love of large buildings. He even sent his sons to Christian school, and Eusebius and other leading Christians sang his praises as God's triumph over paganism. In keeping with the apostasy prevailing in much of the early church, not only had the admonitions against serving in the military been relaxed, but the early Christian abhorrence of striving to acquire personal wealth was gone from mainstream Christianity. Cyprian had even complained that his parishioners were mad about wealth in the previous century, just as today the Christian church was the wealthiest of all religious organizations. The Donatist schism, which will be spoken of more in length in the next lesson, divided Christianity, with Donatus, Bishop of Carthage, proclaiming that any bishop or pastor who had given up his copies of Scripture to the quote police to be burned had forfeited his right to be a bishop, and any baptism he performed was meaningless, as were any ordinations of other Christians workers null and void. Another heresy was created by Arius, of course, from a town near Alexandria, who claimed that Christ was not equal with God, but the first of all created beings, the Logos. We may laugh at this quote Mickey Mouse theology today, but we do have cults who view Christ as a lesser deity, and Bible translations that call him a begotten God, which, as I said earlier, was a favorite verse rendering of the Arians, as Arius followers were called. The pejorative term Arian was eventually ascribed to almost any Christian group that did not follow in lockstep with the Bishop of Rome's pronouncements, but that's for later. Constantine summoned all bishops or pastors to meet in 325 at Bithynian Nicaea for the first ever ecumenical council of the Christian church, and provided all funds for their expense. Most of the bishops were from the eastern provinces, though. The result of the Council of Nicaea was that Arius became anathematized or cursed, his books ordered to be burned, and he was exiled from the empire. Athanasius had championed the concept of the Trinity and won. Constantine has struck a great blow for the unity of the church and its molding into an arm of the state. Durant says that a new civilization had begun at the conclusion of this council, and that the Middle Ages had begun. But not being a Bible believer, even a Christian, he was mistaken. The Dark Ages of history had begun. The resultant fall of political pagan Rome in the West, excuse me, was ensured, and its rebirth spiritually as the even more powerful in some ways Roman Catholic Church, which ruled Europe with an iron fist for over 1,000 years, had commenced with its inquisitions, crusades, stake burnings, and king making. The famed scholar Gibbon, in his epic work on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, agreed that Christianity in large part sealed the fall of Rome in the West. In 330, Constantine would turn his back on Rome and make his capital in the east at Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, Turkey. Early Christian authorities like Tertullian and Cyprian heralded the decline and fall of the ancient world, but it was a painfully slow process which required an apostate church and a great plague to finish it off. Schaff put it in these terms, quote, Christianity gradually supplanted the Greco-Roman heathenism and became the established religion in the empire of the Caesars. Since that time, the church and the state, though frequently jarring, have remained united in Europe, either on the hierarchical basis with the temporal power under the tutelage of the spiritual, are on the Caesaro-papal, with the spiritual power merged in the temporal. While the United States of America, since the end of the 18th century, the two powers have stood peacefully but independently side by side. Some would argue that point. The church could now act upon the state, but so could the state act upon the church. And this mutual influence became a source of both profit and loss, blessing and curse on either side. The martyrs and confessors of the first 3 centuries, in their expectation of the impending end of the world and their desire for the speedy return of the Lord, had never once thought of such a thing as a great and sudden change which meets us at the beginning of this period in the relation of the Roman state to the Christian church. Tertullian had even held the Christian profession to be irreconcilable with the office of a Roman emperor. Nevertheless, clergy and people very soon and very easily accommodated themselves to the new order of things and recognized it in a reproduction of the theocratic constitution of the people of God under the ancient covenant. Save that the dissenting sects who derive no benefit from this union, but rather subject to persecution from the state and from the established Catholicism, the Donatists, for an especial instance, protested against the intermeddling of the temporal power with religious concerns. The heathen who now came over in a mass had all along been accustomed to a union of politics with religion, of the imperial with the sacerdotal dignity. They could not imagine a state without some cultus, whatever might be its name. And as heathenism had outlived itself in the empire, Judaism, with its natural national exclusiveness and its stationary character, was totally disqualified. Christianity must take the throne, unquote. However, in the spiritual darkness to come, there were bright lights blazing. For as Elijah was told when he lamented how his nation had fallen, but what saith the answer of God unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. See Romans 11:4, quoting 1 Kings 19:18. So now the next time we're going to leave Rome, okay? And we've had an overdose of Rome and early Christianity. We're going to go to Yayoi Japanese, India, and China next. We have to start moving around the world and get some context in it, what's going on in other places. All right. Well, thank you for watching and listening. And I hope you study world history on your own, come to your own conclusions. I realize it's just a survey. I just skimmed the surface, didn't talk about a lot of things that were really interesting in the time of Constantine. Just tremendous information out there you should jump into if you're interested in this era and this place. Thank you. Take care.